Hello, everybody. Welcome back. That was a little marathon on last Friday, actually last Saturday. It's about 7 hours total for reviews. All right. I hope some of that stuff helped you guys. Like I said, it's always tricky, you know, to touch other people's models like without ever seeing like the subjects and stuff. But anyway, let me share my screen here. Let's start this right now. So a couple of things I did over the weekend. You saw some of my stuff posted, I bet, like on my website and everything. So I was doing some render tests, and basically like that thing I mentioned to you guys, you know, it's like it's always good to go to the HDRI Haven and just like download a bunch of different HDRIs from there. And then I was doing tests. Those are like the raw renders here in Arnold, but I did a little bit of a post work in Photoshop, so I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit before you get into the paint part. So just like testing the consistency of the forms, you know, because sometimes the model looks good under one lighting situation, and then when you turn to another one, you kind of like you notice like some parts are not like very consistent, right? Like either look too flat or something like that. So I did a couple of those tests, and today I was doing some tests with this lighting environment here. Let me just see what's the name of it so I can have all the names for you. It's called Woods 4K. So basically like the names are all here, all the HDRIs that I'm using. Actually, this one is not there, so let's see which one that is. This one is the old bus. Okay, old bus stop. Okay, so that way you have like all my HDRIs that I'm using right here. You can copy later if you want. But yeah, this Woods 4K is the one I used for my old lady before, and I really like it because it has this interesting, you know, it's like the lighting coming from that side. You can actually put it a little bit more sideways. There's some shadow coming from the other side, so you can actually isolate a little bit, you know, and get the lighting to come like from a certain side. One thing that I did as well was to play a little bit with the shader of the eyeglasses, right? Because you're gonna notice something here, that the caustics actually cause, by default, it causes to look a lot very bright. You know, it's like the caustics, depending on the direction that lighting is coming from, it gets very bright like that. So I just did a little tweak in there, and just to remove some of that brightness from the caustics. And I did this by going to my shader and just like bringing down under the advanced, like all the way down. You go to advanced right here. Under the indirect specular, I just put 0.9 instead of 1. And then the difference is pretty big, you know, it's like between that one and this one in brightness. So I just brought it down a little bit. And also the shader. So there's a difference between this render here and this render here, right? There's a little bit of a difference right there. So this one here is basically the one I was using all the way to this point. And this one is when I switched to the old lady shader, basically like the one that we stole from the old lady, my other renders. So this one you see is a little bit richer when it comes like to some of the milkiness of the skin, right? It looks a little bit more, you know, translucent overall. And there's a little bit more spec as well. So I think I'm going to start the class by just like updating you guys on the shader network I'm using right now, which is basically the old lady one. And then over time, as we progress, we're going to update it, you know, probably like another time or 2 times all the way to the end of next week when we finish everything. But for now, I'm just going to update you guys because since we're going to be painting the albedo, it would be nice to actually plug this with the skin shader I'm using here so we have everything matching. So let's do this. So basically this one here is the one I have assigned to the model right now. Let's check right here. Let's go to, let's see, this angle right here. So if I go to, which one is that? Oh, I think it's this one right here. Yeah, I think that's the one. Let's see. Oops. Yeah. So if I do like I switch my render here to progressive, render, so it goes faster, right? Just to double check that we are using exactly the same thing. Let's get the little window here. Let's see. Let's get something like that area without the caustics. Let's see. Oh man, this is so weird. Like this window here, I mean, like, I don't know what's going on, but if I draw something like this, I cannot get the corners because the corners are kind of offset. I have to go kind of like, I think it's higher like this. Yeah, so if I click around here, then I can pick that. It's so bizarre, but not in that area. It's just gonna render this just to double check if you're using the correct HDRI and the correct skin shader. So this one here should be a match for this guy, the second render right here. So between this and this one, other than the refinement that's still working on that, it's basically the same shader. So just so we are all on the same page, right? Just same thing. So let's open the shader here and see what's plugged. I don't have any albedo plugged in there, so it's pretty, you know, pretty much like just the other passes that we had. So let's take a look at what we have plugged in here. So if you guys want to take note or copy, or just like later you can pause the video and just like copy those values. But basically, like for the skin shader, I'm gonna open all the nodes that I have plugged in here. So the first one is gonna be the displacement that you guys already plugged. Like we are doing this for a couple of days now, right? So should not be a mystery how to plug the displacement. Making sure you have the UDIM set to Mari in here, right? No filter, and then no auto generate TX textures, which is optional. So going back here, the shader. So basically like what I mentioned before is if you wanna create something that looks like a rubber, for example, you wanna make sure you have a little bit of diffuse and subsurface at the same time, but not pure subsurface. If you're using pure subsurface, you're gonna get a material that looks more like silicone and not so much like rubber, right? So if you're trying to simulate like rubber, for example, a latex mask, you're probably gonna use a little bit more from the diffuse pass in here, from the diffuse layer. So, but in this case here, we are cranked all the way to 1 for the subsurface. So that means we are not using anything in here. Anything I go lower than 1, automatically, for example, like 0.999, automatically starts mixing with this, whatever I have set in here. But that's not the case. So ignore base. Let's go straight to specular. First thing you're gonna set is gonna be, your coloring here is gonna be pure white, right? If you're getting like fireflies, for example, little specks in your render, you can reduce from pure white to a little bit less than that, for example, like 0.9 instead of 1. I'm not seeing that so far, but I might have to tweak that. So index of refraction 1.55 I have in here. And then for the specular, I have the specular map plugged. Let's look at the specular map right here in ZBrush. Specular looks like this one here. That's the one we are painting the other day. I still have to update my model that's still like using the old model in there. So flat color, right? Just making sure you have those areas, like I said before, inner part of the eyelids, the tip of the nose, inside of the ear. We're gonna have a little bit more waxy in there. But then the other areas, I'm not adding a lot of white, for example, like the lips, because I wanted to, I don't want it to look super shiny, right? But you know, more shininess around the head. But we already spoke about this map here. So you can see like it's a very broad kind of like noise. It's not like super tiny, otherwise you're gonna get those artifacts I mentioned before. I'm actually eliminating some of that stuff from inside of the nose. It's gonna be fine. I mean, like we're gonna have hair in there. So I'm not too concerned about having, you know, a lot of moist inside of the nose in there. So that's the map we're using for the specular. So basically what I'm doing, I'm plugging that map in here. Let's look at the map first to see what's the intensity I have in here. Unless Maya decided not to open it, which is the case. So Maya's failed to start input. I tell you, man, it's that same problem that we had at the very beginning. And I was like, Maya acting funny, I'm gonna have to reset my whole thing. But anyway, the maps I can actually open. Let's open from here. Let's open from my Explorer, so it should be fine. Let's open right here. What? Oh, it's because I have the UDIM in there, the tag. So specular is this one right here. So it looks like, intensity-wise, it looks like this, right? Super simple. And then I tweaked it a little bit. So if we go to the color balancing here, instead of like using full on alpha gain at 1, right? That's the default. I'm using 0.5 only. So it's basically like a half of this. So it's coming down quite a bit. But depending on your model, I mean, like if you're using like a higher height for the pores and everything, you might want to go, for example, higher, because once you have like deeper pores, that's going to diffuse everything, right? So you might have to use, for example, like a higher gain in here, and then basically like you know, the render is going to take care of like getting things down for you because of the depth of the bumpiness, right? Like the displacement maps. So, but in any case, for that specific intensity I have in here, I'm actually correcting it to half of that around here. And don't forget to use alpha as luminance as well. So that's my specular. For the roughness, I have a roughness map. So the roughness map, I don't think we spoke about it, but I'm gonna tell you about it now. We spoke a little bit about it. So this, basically like you see, like I have this specular map around here. I can actually bake it in there so you can see the difference. So I'm gonna bake it in here. I'm gonna switch to the roughness, right? So the difference between the two maps is this. So they have to talk to each other. They have to work together, right? Those two maps. Because one is going to produce like more or less spec to the skin. So you're going to see like, yeah, you have like wider spots, like going to be more spec, right? And then the other one is going to be creating bump, using how you call it, the procedural bump that we have, the cell noise, and it's going to try to break it more or less. So you're going to see more of the breakup or less of the breakup. So if you're seeing more of the breakup, those areas tend to go more rough. And if you're seeing less, for example, the tip of the nose, inside of the eyelids, you're going to see less of that bumpiness, so it's going to get shinier. So basically, like I'm increasing the amount of shininess right here and also here. So the nose is going to get quite shiny, right? Same for inside of the eyelids. But the rest here is a little bit of a mix, right? Because I have, in this one here, is kind of plain, this whole area. So the lips are not super shiny or anything. But if you look at the roughness map, I have more shininess right there inside, right? And I still have to paint a little bit more in there. This one is actually came from the other model I had before. So you see, like it kind of talks to this one here in a way, because I have more shininess inside of the ears, same kind of spots, right? Like other than the inside of the nose in there, I'm just removing the micro bump from inside of it. And the difference is that this is kind of like a plain map. It doesn't have any noise to it, right? So it's easy to paint. Basically, like just, I don't even use like any alphas. It's just like no alphas, and then just like go paint with the RGB very low, like 1 or 2, and then like layer by layer, just like, so this is basically a visual reference for you guys, you know, how to approach that. For the color, then yes, we're gonna do a full tutorial for the color. But for this one, since it's black and white map, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna leave as a you know, visual reference. And also I'm gonna do some screen captures of all those models as I have them in here. They're not finished or anything, but at least you know the position of everything that I have and the intensity I'm using. So, you know, I can do that at the end of this class and then post for you guys together with the video. So this is basically the roughness map. So if I go to my roughness in here, if I open my map for roughness, let's see. Rough. Where is it? Roughness right here. So it looks like that, right? Same map. So let's take a look at here. And again, so roughness. So I have like set to off right here. Again, same UDIM, right? It has to be UDIM to be able to find all the files. Same thing down there, no auto textures. And then for adjustments I'm still keeping the alpha gain at 1. But this is kind of like, it could be either way, you know. It's like, for example, instead of like bringing the exposure down by like, I don't know, like 20% or something, I could bring this alpha gain down, right? So it's optional in there. Sometimes I do one or the other one. I don't know why, but you know, whatever. So the exposure here is minus 0.2. So I'm bringing it down the whole thing together, right? Like the brightness and everything. And then, so let's switch now. We saw the specular transmission we are not using because it's not a transparent object, so we're gonna keep it fine. Subsurface, right? We're using full on subsurface 1. Then for the color, to get this result to look like this, right? Like across the board, it's kind of consistent. It doesn't look too bad, like for a like a neutral kind of color, right? It works under different lighting. If the lighting is a little bit, you know, cooler, it looks nice. If it's a little bit warmer, it looks nice too. So this one I like quite a bit. So it should be working fine, right? Like for that, for this purpose here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm probably gonna copy this color and start, this is my base color for ZBrush, right? But just so you guys know what color that is, I'm using this. You can copy the values in there. It's like 24.94, 0.363, and 0.438. And this is gonna be kind of like a starting point. You see it's a little darker, right? If I see in RGB 0 to 1, those are the values I have, 0.438, 0.345, 0.279. So this is for the subsurface color, which is going to be replaced with the albedo we're going to be painting. For the radius in here, again, like I tend to leave like this mid value here below 0.5. If I have like over 0.5, what happens is that you start getting a lot of green tint into the subsurface, and sometimes it's hard to get rid of it. So for my RGB, I'm using like 1, 0.440, and 0.3 in here for RGB 0 to 1. For HSV, I'm using 12, and then 0.7. And so actually, this one is the one I normally bring down to prevent like green tint. I'm not seeing it now, but if I start seeing some of that, I'm probably going to bring this one to around 0.5. But these values are working for me for all those renders so far. I don't think we're going to have a problem with the green tint at this point. But if I do, I mean, that's the way I normally resolve. You know, it's like by desaturating more the saturation slide in here. So that's the values we have in there. So for the scale, I'm using 0.130. I might go a little bit higher, a little bit lower. Sometimes what I try to do is that if I go a little bit higher, then everything gets very translucent, right? And sometimes I tend to look like with a strong backlight, for example, around the ears, to see how much the light is actually penetrating the ear. So I can have like, instead of like having that glowy back right here, it's just enough to pass through that, you know, so I get a little bit of that, you know, this little line right here in the wrinkles, right? But without being too extreme. So yeah, so I'm using that. And to create a little bit more of that milkiness, and the difference between not so milky and milky is this one here that I was showing before. So basically like this one was the previous shader, and this one here has a little bit more of the front scatter. So between this and this, if it's too strong, you can dial back. But after all the shaders are in place, I believe this one is gonna work fine, right? But if it's too strong, I can bring it down a little bit. So basically right here, I'm using this slider here, which is basically like the anisotropy slide, which basically like is gonna switch, not switch, but it's gonna define what's like back scatter and front scatter. By default, this is 0. So it scatters just as much like from the front and from the back of the bottle. But as you start going higher here, then you start scattering more the front. And I like that because sometimes I get more of this organic feel in the skin if I do a little bit more front scatter than the back scatter. So in this case, I'm using 0.1, but depending on the type of skin, sometimes I just use 0.5, you know, but having a little bit more front scatter, I think it gives you this extra, you know, kind of like milky, flashy kind of quality to it. So that was the subsurface. For the coat I'm using color at 1, right? Maximum. The roughness I'm using 0.480, which is very rough overall. And the index of refraction 1.55. I use that because this is kind of like the sweat pass, you know, it's not like the main spec. It's basically like a secondary spec that's going to be like the sebum, you know, layer basically. So and for the weight here, so I'm using the same specular map that we used before. So it's exactly the same specular map I'm using for the coat. So I, out of being a little lazy, I suppose. But what I'm doing here, I'm changing a couple of things. So instead of using, let's see how much we are using for the spec here. For the spec, we are using a total of 0.5 for the alpha gain. And I think I'm using a little bit more for the coat because the coat, since it's more diffuse overall, more rough, I actually, instead of 0.5, I'm using 0.6, right? So combined, they are a little bit more than one, basically, but combine the two of them. At the end, I might tweak them up or down. It all depends on how much I'm gonna go in terms of detail over the face. For example, the nose of my model at this point doesn't have any detail. Just those few pores we added the other day. I didn't do any more work on top of that. So like if I look at the HD here, I mean, like you see the nose is very plain. I only have like that very generic kind of like a circular kind of leathery texture that we did. But other than that, nothing else. So that's why it's very shiny right now. Depending on how it's going to look after I have the detail in there with more breakup in the surface with pores and everything, then I might have to increase this or decrease depending on how it looks, And then another thing you're going to do, I mean, like remember when we were looking at those colors, those maps, for example, right? You look at the map like this, you can, for example, like contrast this more or less inside of Maya by playing with those offsets, right? So you can contrast more, for example, like the overall exposure, bring everything up. So the whites become much wider, right? And you can use like an offset. And for example, like the alpha gain, you can use like just a little bit, and the offset, for example, if you want to bring like some whiteness across the board to the whole thing, then you can actually bring this up like the alpha offset. So basically like everything that's black is going to start getting lighter and lighter and lighter with the offset until everything is white and completely level with this one, right? So you can do both. Like you can bring down the whites right here, right? Like everything. And then you can level adding white in general. So everything's going to start getting more like grayish overall. So you can play with those things, just to level. Or you can just like color treat them in Photoshop and resave them. It's always an option, right? I'm a little lazy, so I tend to just like tweak inside of Maya and get that done around here. So basically that's the coat. So nothing else in there. For the roughness, you're probably going to put like some roughness map plugged in here as well. I can actually do this now. Let's do it. So let's get this going here. So let's just, I have my model selected. Let's just go to graph materials. You can just click this one here so I can expand everything with input and output connections. So I can see the entire shader network, which is very simple at this point, right? Just like that. And then I can just duplicate, for example, this roughness map right here. You can press Control D for duplicate. And then now let's click this one here. And we're gonna plug the out alpha into the coat roughness right there, right? So let's see. Now we have the roughness in there. And now we're gonna have to check if at the end of the day, I'm gonna have to color correct something here. It's like, this is using exactly what the spec is using, but then I need to do some renders to see if I need some adjustments. And it's always gonna depend on your painting, right? Like if you did the maps like much lighter than I did in here, you're probably gonna have to underexpose more. If you did much darker, you're gonna have to overexpose more, right? But this is kind of like the reference, visual reference for you just to see how mine is working. Okay, so coat, we got the roughness plugged in there now. We're gonna test later. And then from here, sheen, I'm using a tiny little bit, which is that tiny little micro Fresnel that I mentioned. That's kind of like a microfiber kind of thing, like for velvet, and, so and satin, right? So I'm using 0.025. It's very, very little, and the roughness 0.3. Emission, nothing, because not emissive, that doesn't emit light. Thin film, nothing. Geometry, okay, I'm using the cell noise, just recapping here. Those are the parameters I'm using for my cell noise. I have to turn off additive, otherwise it doesn't work, right? And then those are all the parameters I'm using. Between 50 and 60 here for the scale. So I'm using 50 at this point. And you can copy those ones, and everything else should be default. And then this is basically like it's plugged to the bump value, right? Remember, like when you plug this one, if you recap like in the previous videos, you're gonna see that we had to select one of the colors. So I picked green, and I plugged the green into the bump value in here, right? And then for the bump depth, then we are using that map that we painted in ZBrush as well, which is the third map that we have, which is that bump depth right here. Let's just switch to flat color. So it's very similar to the roughness one. I think the roughness, the only difference is a little bit more contrasted, and there's some other tweaks in there. But overall, you could potentially use the same map for both, you know, like the bump depth. Because at the end of the day, they are doing a similar thing. The roughness map is actually doing what the bump map is doing here, because the bump is breaking up the surface, you know, more in those white areas and less in the black areas, just like the roughness map is doing. So the roughness map is something that I wasn't using before, and then I started using just to give me like extra control. You know, I could potentially like tweak this map forever until I got like perfect just for the bump depth to work and make everything work without the necessity of this. But this is a great, you know, like shortcut if you don't want to spend too much time. And if you're not going to be doing like super, you know, zoomed in renders, you know. But if you are, then I would keep things a little bit more physically accurate, I guess. So this is the map I'm using. And then this one is plugged into my bump depth right here, right? So bump depth. And then for the tweaks that we did, you can see here, that's basically what we played last time. So instead of like the alpha gain being at 1 in here by default, I'm actually using very, very little of it. So 0.015. And the only way I know this was working is because we turned our shader into a default shader, right? Like it was just black, like a gray shaded. And then we tweaked this, like looking at the render in real time in there, and we were able to actually see, okay, this amount here doesn't look too high or too low, so it looks okay for what it is. And then I think in terms of shader for the skin, I think that covers everything. I'm not using caustics at this point, no internal reflections either, right? So everything is covered here. So if you copy those parameters, you can pause the video later and do like a little bit slower. You should be able to get a result very similar. You know, it's like obviously the specular map is going to influence, you know, how it's going to look at the end in the forms themselves, right? But overall, we should get something similar. And then the last thing is let's take a look here. Is I'm going to click my model. I'm going to click in the second tab, go to Arnold, and then this is basically like in the past I would turn like this opaque. I would turn it off for transparent objects. Like for objects that are not transparent, you always keep opaque on, right? But then, for example, for glasses, I would turn it off because otherwise the shadow is not transparent, right? But interesting thing is that in the manual, it says this: if you want to produce caustics, you have to keep it opaque. So if I didn't have caustics in here, it should be fine with that being, you know, transparent. But since I'm using caustics, then it needs this to be opaque to be able to calculate it. So it's a little, you know, counter productive, but yeah, but that's what it is. And then that's basically it. But let's see, for the skin itself, just recapping very fast. Remember to add like shared SSS for all the objects that have subsurface. For example, the teeth in here have subsurface. All of them have the same shared name in there. So it helps like blending those different surfaces more correctly without like dark areas and stuff when you see two different objects. And then for my subdivision levels, I'm using 4. Then Catmull Clark, object, linear for the smoothing. And then displacement, like I said, if your displacement is too high, for example, you can actually tweak this, you know, put like half of it, or, you know, 75% of it, or you can crank to twice of what you have. It always depends on what you want to do, but this is basically should be the accurate representation from wherever you have in ZBrush. And then for auto bump, I'm using auto bump for basically those 2 parameters, right? So that's basically it, like a little recap for the face, the geometry stuff, and also the skin shader. So now we are kind of like ready to go and paint some albedo. and then at the end, do some render to try to get some color to this guy. So for the albedo stuff, let's take a look at some images here. So if you look on the internet, you're gonna find references from different artists like painting albedo. And then I found this one here that this one is going around. You know, it's like it's an interesting one, which is based on some previous studies that I've seen. So like it's just like a overall philosophy behind it. It's kind of like it's a little bit of a rough representation, right? Like yellower around there, more red, and then bluish around here. And this is very strong. Obviously, we're not going to go that strong, but it's just to show the separation between those tones and the colors, right? And then you have those ones in here that's kind of like a little bit more broken up, right? So recovering some of that area, like the yellows in here, some yellow in here too, you know. I use, for the most part, I use a similar scheme when I paint my stuff, but it's more, I use some purples as well in certain areas, right? And I'm not that literal with this stuff. I mean, like what I tend to do is, for example, if I have an area that has like, for example, like a bony surface, let me just go back here and show you an example. Let's see. Let's see, a good one would be, let's try with Stan here. So see images. Let's try. Yeah, those ones are like an old version of it. Yeah, this is kind of like an old version of it. But you see like those areas, for example, around here where you have like a bony surface, like especially like around the orbital and everything, I tend to go a little bit more yellow, pale yellow, which is kind of like whitish. I normally add more pale skin underneath the eyebrows. It's almost like, you know, especially like those older dudes, like white dudes, they're gonna have like this kind of like whitish skin underneath. You know, imagine like there's a lot of shade being produced in there, so not a lot of sun gets in there. And then every time you have compression, for example, see like the eye bags in here, there's a compression happening there. So if there's a compression, I paint a very pale yellow, kind of like almost whitish yellow with a tiny little bit of green mixed with it, right? Just for that kind of stuff. And then every time you have cartilage, you see like there's a little bit of whitish tone right here. It's very subtle, right here at the tip of the nose, right? And then right below the lip, for example, in the edge of the lip, there's a little bit of a whitish color as well. So I try to imagine this as being a physical object or like a person, right? So every time you have like bone structure or cartilage, and you know that this is actually forcing its way through the skin, right? Basically, like it's kind of like at the surface. I'm gonna go pale yellow, white, and every time there's a compression, something that's more like this, like an eye bag or something, then I try to go similar tone, but it's a little bit more pulling towards the green, right? For the around the eyelids, for example, I tend to use slightly magenta instead of like going like a bright red. None here is bright. I mean, like none of the colors is bright. One thing is that I see my students doing a lot. You know, it's like it's just I keep commenting the same thing over and over again. Is that don't go too saturated with the colors, you know, because if you do, everything becomes like a makeup, like a bad makeup, you know. It seems like someone who's just learning, like a little girl learning how to put makeup and put like gets the reddest possible lipstick, you know, everything is super saturated. Don't do that. I'm gonna show you the tones I use. They are very, very, like a red is never like pure red. It's like a red mixed with a ton of gray. So it's kind of like a very desaturated red. You know, it's like that area inside of the mouth right there. It's a little bit more magenta, but it's also mixed with a lot of gray, right? So none is like super saturated. And if it is saturated for whatever reason, then I'm gonna use like a very low intensity for it. So if I go for something more saturated, I'm gonna use like 1 or 2 for intensity, right? So that's kind of like the same approach I'm gonna do here, but the difference, what I'm trying to do today, I try to, you know, every new class, I try to come up with some different approach. The main complaint is that the compression of those videos, because I paint everything so subtle, just the way I sculpt things, right? Like I go layer by layer instead of like going completely, you know, strong from the get-go. basically like during the compression and everything, when the video is uploaded, some of my students cannot even see what I'm doing because like it's very, very subtle little passes. So I'm thinking about doing an approach that's actually forcing those colors to become like very visible, so you know exactly what I'm doing, and then come with a layer and actually blend everything. You know, it's like after that. But just to make sure that things are a little bit easier to understand, you know, so there is no doubt. Some other similar approaches here, right? Same thing, yellow, brown, red, and then blue. Obviously, if you're sculpting like a kid or a woman, you probably like this blue part here. I mean, like there's no beard or anything, right? The tone's gonna be a little bit much more subtle. I think it would be kind of like closer to the yellow. You know, it's like kind of a little bit of blue, but a little bit yellow too, mixed. So it's kind of like greenish, you know, around this area here, but very, very subtle. I would not go full blue if it's a woman or a kid. But you see, like this is a very similar approach, like in terms of the colors, and this comes from this one here as well, right? Very similar. Blue, green, or gray chin, red cheeks and nose, yellow, white. So we're going to be doing a similar approach, but obviously we're going to be breaking up the whole thing much further than those zones, right? This is just like an indication. We're going to go for something that's more like this, at certain areas, you know, going to be detailing certain things that go beyond this as well because of those details that I mentioned before. So let's start with looking at the color that we had before, and start as a base color so we can actually have something to work with. So let's do select my object here, make sure we have the shader selected, and let's go see what we have for the subsurface again. And let's copy those values here. I don't have a pen here, but let's try. Let's put it on the side here. Let's copy this one. Can I do that? I don't think I can. Let's just copy it right here in a little document, so I don't need to double check. Let's do this. Okay, let's copy this from here. 438, 345, whoop, 345, 279. Seven nine, something like that, right? Oops. So let's get this the side here, so I have a reference, and then I'm just gonna go and let's start like same thing I did for the other passes in here. It's gonna be the same thing. I'm gonna just select my main object, the one that I have my HD geometry and all that stuff, right? But I mean, like as soon as I duplicate this model, the HD is gonna go away. So I'm gonna duplicate it, and I'm gonna instantly rename it. Make sure that this one is the one that has the HD at the top. Let's see if I have it. Yeah, so this one has HD. Cool. So this one should be my albedo. So I'm gonna just rename it to albedo, like that. And then I can hide everything else, make it solo, right? Like that. And so let's start with turning off my Z ads, just keep like RGB. And then let's go to color. And we're just gonna input those values in here. So it's gonna be, oh, it's, oh, yeah, of course. I did the wrong thing because it's in ZBrush, it goes from, oh, can I change that, by the way? It goes from 0 to 150, 255. I might be able to change, but I don't know. Let's take a look here. Let's see, Maya. Let's copy those values again, but in 0 to 255, so I can know what's going on. Let's go to subsurface, get this one. Oops, and then switch from here to 0 to 255. So 112, 88, 71. 71. Let's see. 112, 88.
Chris,
yes.
I usually use a snipping tool. Windows 10 has it usually. To a screen grab, and it just appears on the side of the screen.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just like to have a quick reference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I'm so old. See, like 88 and then 71. So that's basically what I have for my base skin right there. it looks a little dark overall, you know. It's like, but in my renders, it's looking just right. So I'm gonna keep going with that. If it's too dark at the end, then I'm gonna just make everything brighter with that where is it, poly paint. Just gonna do the poly paint adjustment, right? So, but for now I have this color selected. Let's just do I have RGB at 100%. Gonna go to color fill object. So now it's baked into my specking there. Actually, I'm tripping here, man. For this pass here, I'm not gonna use this model. I'm gonna use my actual HD because we are painting in HD, man. See, I was about to forget. So let's go back to the model itself, and that's the one we're gonna be painting here. So let's do in the HD model. So let's go color, and then fill object again. So now we're talking. And then now we can go HD and we can start painting. I'm gonna start with just with a mask without any of the inside stuff, right? Like not the mouth pocket in there or anything, or eye pockets. I'm gonna just do get the nose and the lips, and then everything else I can paint later. But I wanna make sure I have something like that. I don't need the neck for now either, so I wanna use as much polygons as I can. Let's try with this guy here. This one. Let's try that. And then let's try to save some polygons, try to remove some of that stuff, and maybe I can get this whole chunk here as HD. Let's see. Yeah, the whole thing came in HD for 30 million polygons, so that's great. And then let's start by looking at the brushes I'm gonna be using here. For just this basic first pass, I'm just gonna use like the standard brush with no alphas or anything, just with a very low intensity for the color. Now, I normally use very low intensity, but because I wanna make sure that you guys are seeing what I'm doing, I'm gonna actually do very strongly first, and then I'm gonna try to bring everything down. That's gonna be a first for me. I normally don't do it this way. But I want to make sure that you guys are seeing the areas I'm painting those colors. So I'm going to start with this. Uh-oh, what happened? Okay, good. Oh, hey, let me just do one thing before I start. This stroke here has lazy mouse, so that's going to make things too slow. All right, so I got like my yellow area right there. I think in the even with the compression, you guys going to be able to see that. So let's switch to something more red. And then the red, I'm not gonna go all the way here. Like I said, not fully saturated, but I'm still gonna keep fairly saturated because I want you guys to see what I'm doing. And then, so I'm gonna paint this area in the middle. So in the in-between, let's see something like, all right. So it's like, it's slow because it's painting across like with a big brush at once, right? So that's my my reds right there. And now let's switch to the blues, but then the blues, I'm not gonna do a super saturated blue either, right? So I'm gonna go a little bit more on this side. Actually gonna go a little bit more towards the green. So that's gonna be like the last bit around this area here, right? So that's basically like, you know, the approaching here. Normally what I do, I start with the base color, and then all those things I add like very slowly, right? Like it's very selectively. I don't do it this way ever, but I want to do as a try, you know, it's like to make sure that you guys are seeing everything that I'm doing. So let's try, for example, like that exercise that I mentioned before. Now that we have those colors defined in there, let's get the material that actually can reveal everything. So this material here is the one I use like for painting, right? Like for sculpting. So the skin shader works nicely in this first pass when you cannot see the elements yet. But then as soon as I start seeing the elements, once you have more color in it, then I switch to the flat color. And I want to see just flat color from that point on, because I want to make sure exactly what I'm painting, right? So let's do switch back here to the skin shade. So we're going to stay in this mode here for a little bit. If you want to see even more stuff, you can tweak your material. in the modifiers in here, you can use, for example, diffuse, you can put a little bit more, maybe like 90, right? And then the ambient, maybe a little bit more, like 20. So you can see better. And then let's take a look at those areas I mentioned before. So for example, like if I have like see the color I'm using, like it's not a full yellow or green, so it's kind of like something in between. And I use something that's kind of like light like this. And then I'm gonna try to do it here in a way that you guys can see in there. So for example, for the bags in here, I would paint those colors around here, right? And then for the nose, I can add a little bit of that, just like around the cartilage. I can do a little bit right here as well, this bump. I think it's gonna be easy for you guys to see it this way more than how I normally do. And then around this perimeter of the lips in here, I'm gonna use a similar tone, but it's gonna be, just imagine that everything is gonna come down later, right? We're gonna even out this whole thing. This is just kind of like easy for you to see, but everything's gonna come down, and this yellow is gonna become more white than yellow, okay? But I'm gonna do this around this lip line around here. And everything that you're seeing, again, it has to be very discreet. Everything here is just help. If you do this in your actual paint, it's gonna look pretty weird in the renders. But for our, you know, way to learn from this, it's gonna be better if I do it very strongly. So if this works, if this experience works, it should work. I mean, like, it's just a matter of like repainting things and making things even. At least, like, maybe I'm not gonna get this complaint of, you know, I cannot see because of the compression. I hope this bypasses that problem, you know. So, and then now I can start doing a similar approach for those areas that I have more bony structures, right? So instead of like this tone that's kind of pale yellow, I'm gonna go more towards the white now. Still kind of yellow, but more towards the white right there. And I'm gonna paint, for example, like if you're painting like a white person, right? I'm gonna go and add more of that underneath the eyes, for example, get this area wider like this. Even like when I was painting my African warrior, I tried to start painting straight away, like in the color I thought it would be the color of the skin, and I had trouble with it. So the best and the easiest way for me was to paint like white skin, and then basically with the color adjustments of my poly paint, then I adjusted to a darker tone, and that worked fine, because that way you can introduce a lot of variations like this that otherwise would be very hard to represent if you're just seeing like a dark skin. So you can get more richness just by starting like with the pale skin and then like turning it overall darker, you know. At least that's what I found. So that same tone I used in there, a little bit more white. I'm gonna get a little bit around here, just this area of the nose. Cartilage, like I said, right? Cartilage and bone. And then I can even add a little bit of that tone, this compressed line. Maybe it's a little bit too much. You have to go a little bit lower with that. Just a little compression in here. And then for the eyebrows, so basically you're gonna have like this whole area is gonna be bone. So just gonna add more of this whiteness where the bone is gonna be, which in this case here is gonna propagate, right? Gonna get like around. You can add even a little bit, you know, in the zygomatic. Add some of that tone in there. So you see like slightly, it's almost like a airbrush, right? Just airbrushing a little bit of that tone in there. Now we're gonna move to an area like the chin, for example, add a little bit of that around the chin area. Also compression in here, right? And then from this point on, let's see, maybe a little bit around the muzzle as well. You see, like I'm using a tone that's very, very pale yellow for most of this bone structures, and also for the you know, accumulation of fat underneath the skin. Now, the thing about those guys is that they lose a lot of fat from their skin, right? So I don't know exactly how this is gonna turn out. I might have to even things out a little bit, you know, so I can remove some of this yellow to look more natural. But I believe because they're so pale that it's going to work out, you know. See, like in this case here, when you have a smile, imagine like there's a compression here. So you're pulling, if you smile right now and you touch that area, there's a compression against the lower teeth. And then with the compression, you're also going to cause a little bit of the you know, the blood flow to get out there a little bit. So it's going to get a little whitish and pale in there, right? If you do like, if you really force it, you can see it, but you know, just very slightly. And then now, okay, I got those tones in there. They look very strong. I think it's easier for you guys to see, right? What I have so far. Now let's get, for example, let's get the reference here of one of those little guys. Let's get this one here. It has a skin. It's a tiny little, you know, resolution, but you can see it here. Look. So there's like some purples and pinks around the eyes, right? You see like there's a little bit more of the whitish right here in the skull, right around here as well. So I'm gonna get more of that area a little bit wider, and purples and magentas as well around this area here, right? So there's a plenty of purples and magentas around this area and around the mouth. So basically like eyes and mouth. So I'm gonna start introducing some of that. We're gonna notice like, yeah, there's some blues and greens in the veins themselves. And there's some blues and greens around the inner part of the eyes in here, because underneath you have those micro veins as well. So let's do some of that. Let's introduce some of those purples. Again, like if I go to something like, by purple, I mean like it's not something like this, right? I'm talking about something that's a little bit more towards gray like this. And then again, I normally paint like with a very low intensity, but now I'm gonna paint it much stronger so you can actually see what I'm doing. So just add some purples around this area. And then hopefully I'm gonna be able to even things out later. So around the eyes here in general. And then in his case, he has a little bit of purple around here and around the mouth. So some purples in there. Get some more around here as well. Very like, I'm kind of like going a little bit lighter with the layers now, but you're still probably going to be able to see fine. And then let's get, for example, oh wait, I have the ears in here. I could show something with the ears, but so if I want to sample some of those colors and repeat the process, I can just go and pick the color straight away right there. Let's pick it something from here. And I want to introduce a little bit more of this cartilage in this area here in the zygomatic bone. It's a little bit paler in there, right? I get a little paler right here as well. And then let's get some reds. Again, the red is kind of the saturated red. Get more like towards something like that. And then let's, so basically like I'm just, you know, it's just blocking everything, right? Everything here is being blocked at this point. And then we're gonna come with a bunch of different noise brushes, and we're gonna play with that, and we're gonna make this look more naturalistic. I'm gonna add some more reds around here as well, just kind of pale in the forehead and the sides. Still very bright, right? But hopefully gonna be able to just bring it all down. But at least you can see what I'm doing here. And then let's go to the lips. So lips are gonna get like a little bit more towards magenta, like that, and very desaturated as well. I'm gonna start with a tone like that. Just get everything I'm doing here is basically like the opposite of what I normally do, which is like I don't paint anything saturated or too strong from the get-go, but I guess that's what I have to do for you guys to be able to see and understand. So let's go a little bit darker than that, something like this. Still like in the kind of grayish, very desaturated. Okay. So now that I have the colors blocked in here, now you know what how I'm gonna approach this whole thing, right? So now I think I'm gonna have to apologize beforehand if you guys don't see when I start actually smoothing things out and just removing some of this color. The color is still gonna obey the same scheme here overall, but they're gonna be making things much more, you know, subtle. So I'm gonna add some greens, and the green is gonna be like between green and blue around here. And I'm gonna do, again, like saturated so you can see. I'm gonna introduce some of them right here, this area where some veins would be. I can add some of them even here in the muzzle, slightly. Right. And then that should be good. Even a little bit here, this lower area, right there. And then let's start like making things a little bit more even. So this is like, you see like this whole process, you only took me the standard brush and no alphas, right? I'm using an intensity of 10, but you know, normally I would use like between 2 and 3 only, and really control the pressure with my tablet, right? At this point here, we're just trying to do something for you guys to see. So let's create a copy of this brush here. Let's do like a clone, right? Brush clone. And if you don't have a brush like that, you can create one right now with me. So I'm gonna switch like from stroke to spray. I'm gonna go to spray, I'm gonna reduce the color to 0 because I don't want any variation in there. And then we can play with those things that I mentioned the other time. Depending on the effect you want, you can either use like an alpha like this, like alpha 70 here, or the 23, right? So you have like a brush that's a spray plus the spray brush, right? So kind of like you get double spray in there. So it's like very thin spray. Or you can go for something that's kind of like small, you know, like let's say if you do like an alpha 47 in there, let's pick a color that you can see. Let's see something dark like that. See, that's a nice little spray in there to start blocking the color, right? I'm just making a funny color so you can see what I'm doing. And then that's the difference like between this and then switching this to, for example, like the alpha 70 here, that this one gets extra spray, right? You can use that one as well, but I'm gonna start with something a little bit more broad. So we're gonna do like the alpha, what's that, 47 that I used before, something like that, right? So I'm gonna start adding some of those colors, and from this point on, that everything is blocked, I'm gonna try to diffuse everything, always using those brushes with the spray, right? Just changing you know, some properties of the spray. So if the flow is too much, if it's flowing too much like that, they are too much together, right? You can always reduce the flowing here to 0, for example, and then you get just a few of them like that, right? Just go like for spots later on, stuff like that. If you want more density, then obviously just increase the flow to something much higher, and you get a lot of density in there, right? But I'm gonna keep something more default. Let's see like a 0.3, something like that. That should be good. And I'm gonna start by getting like sampling a color that's similar to what I have in here, but I'm gonna start spraying everything. And at the end, I'm gonna show you this. At the end, when you add like your darker tones first, which is normally how I start, at the end, when you switch this spray to something like I said, like the yellow, pale, almost white right here, it's just a tiny bit, and then you have a spray like that, you get an interesting effect. It has to be kind of small. I mean, like if I have the brush small, like this kind of effect, if you use it just with very low intensity, for example, like 2 or 3, this kind of stuff here just adds that little extra layer of realism to the whole thing at the end when you have all the dark tones in place. So we're gonna be doing a lot of that little whitish spray at the end. But for now, let's just switch to a color that's more generic. Like let's get something around this area here, right around here. So it's kind of like a average kind of skin tone. And then I'm gonna start painting everything here with my spray brush. So I'm gonna try to even things out more towards this bluish lower part, like I said, which is like, it has to be discreet enough, right? It cannot be something that screams at you. So I'm just gonna be blending this whole area here with this average kind of color. Let's get some similar one around here. And then let's go again. Just do a little blending. Let's go a little bit higher because at this point it's too subtle. This whole area. Let's get the nose here. That's still a little bit too reddish, right? So let's get a little bit higher. And then this whole green that I did right there in purple, just gonna do another layer here just to even things out. Now I'm gonna sample a color more like this pale, let's see, something between here. So between this pale yellow and the pinkish in there. So it's a little bit lighter. To blend this, same for the nose. And I'm doing everything symmetrically for now, but then I'm gonna switch to asymmetrical. I'm gonna get more into the nose in there. For now, everything's gonna be symmetrical. And then this is just like it's gonna be the first pass for skin. But the thing that really sells the skin is when you start putting like little, you know, like either like liver spots or little tiny little spots, you know, it's like dark spots and stuff. It really adds a lot to the skin when you have those imperfections. But for now, we're just gonna make like this broad version of the noise, right? At this point here, if I switch, for example, to the flat color, you can start seeing some of the forms now. So at some point, we're gonna have it so visible that you don't need to see that anymore, you know? The other shader, you can use this one straight away. So let's just go, and I'm gonna switch back in here, get a little bit of that color, and just like blend things around here some more. So I'm gonna eliminate like this super whitish part here in the muzzle just by blending like thin layers of spray brush, right? Like thin layers. Same around here. On the eye. Really introducing some more noise everywhere. Okay. You can actually make the noise bigger if you want. Just make things a little bit more broad around here. If it's getting too weird like in the middle, just turn off the symmetry. And then paint the middle part first. And then switch back so you can actually cover more ground. Even here, you know, it's like in this area here of the jawline, I can actually copy some of this wider and get some more of that around there. Chin as well, get some of that. Now I can start blending this whole thing, like the nose in here. It's gonna have to get a little bit more red. So you're gonna get some more reds in the kind of pinkish. So again, it's gonna be saturated red, right? The saturated red. I'm gonna paint around here. More around the lips in there. And let's get a color that's kind of like an in-between here again. Let's try something like this and bring it up a little bit, like a little bit lighter overall. Get this to blend better too. I'm feeling like it's kind of like in the past I would paint with a very low intensity, mid 3, and you would, seems like it was producing, you know, a stronger result. So now I'm seeing myself having to use over 10 in there or something like that to be able to see anything. Maybe it's because I went full on like with stronger colors first, and then I'm having to counter them now. Let's do you know, go to a little bit more magenta here and a little bit lighter tone for the nose and see what I get. Yeah, that's gonna look better. There. Here, and now I can actually introduce some oranges. Let's get around here. Also the saturated. Let's put some oranges in here. See, like now it's too strong. Let's try that. I got a little strong there. This is kind of similar to what people painting latex masks back in the day for the, special effects would do, because the latex doesn't have a lot of translucency, right? So they had to simulate all those layers. So they would do like a similar approach like that, paint like strong colors. And on top of that, like those movies are so dark, like horror movies, for example, right? And they are so dark, so they had to do something about it. So if you go to ILM one day, it's like we have all those props in there, and they are very, very saturated, like colors. You have some of the Ghostbusters stuff, and very saturated. So they look kind of cheesy, it's like in person, but then you look in the movie, it looks super cool, because they kind of like they play for the camera, right? Like they have to do more saturated, all those colors, because they know it's going to go kind of away, and it's going to look just right at the end. So now I'm starting to add like this lighter color. You see, like it's a tiny little bit of red and orange in there, but kind of like a lighter version, like very almost like pinkish. So I'm starting to do like this smaller pass, and then it looks like, when your skin is like cold, right? Like you get out in the cold, for example, in the snow, and your skin looks a little bit, you get like all those red dots, right? And some pale dots as well. It kind of looks a little bit like that, it's like just introducing this skin tone variation just by introducing some of this lighter tones now. And like I said before, this lighter tones is what I think is the glue, it's like it makes things look more organic. Is once you break everything with this lighter tone like this, at least I think it looks cool. So I was doing asymmetrically, which is not a bad thing, but just means I'm gonna have to do twice now. So let me do some of that around here as well. And then I'm gonna switch to symmetry again. So basically, like, I'm gonna cover the entire thing here with this little specks of whitish tone to show like the, the underneath the skin variations in there, basically, like between like blood vessels and, it's like the blood traveling through the to the surface of the skin, right? And then getting strangled in some spots, or, flushing out of a certain area. So now I'm just like blend everything. Oh, I don't like that, to use the symmetry right on top of the nose. That was gonna be so visible. I'm gonna turn it off right there. Now we're talking. Okay, some of that nice variation. And everything I'm doing here, you're not seeing the movement of my hand, but it's like, it's all in circles, like it's basically like I'm gonna do slowly so you can see it's like this, everywhere, like that. And I was saying before, I mean, like I mentioned in some of my previous classes, that there's a lot that's, for example, like if you see tutorials on the internet, or even this one I'm doing here, you don't know how the artist is doing certain things because of you're not seeing the movement of the hand, and also the pressure and all this stuff. But there's a lot of power in gesture, there are certain things you can do, for example, with a fast motion that's very different from a slow motion. So for example, I'm gonna do like, I crank the color in here very high so you can see. So if I go slow in here, that's the result I get, right, with the slow motion. Now let's see the same thing like fast. That's what I get with the fast motion, right? So basically, like if I do like in an area like this, like slow circles like that, slow circles, I get that. If I do in the same area with fast circles, I get that, right? So it's a matter of like it's just as important as learning how to use the pressure sensitivity to create something that's a little bit lighter or darker, but also the speed, so you can get different patterns. It's like, so you can do something like this that has like very spread out patterns, and basically without changing anything in the parameters, you can do something like this, right? So what I'm doing right now is kind of in between. It's doing something that's a little bit in between. So it's called a circular motions without going over the same spot too many times like that. And with the semi-fast motion, but not super fast. Basically, that's what I'm doing, in a very subtle way, right? So I'm using like very subtle intensity, maybe like 6 or something. Yeah, with 6, I can do that. And I can get this nice little variation in the skin right there. So let's do that. I'm gonna go all over here. And you see this area is still very pink. I got a lot of pink going on in there. That's gonna have to come down. Anything that strikes your eye, like, okay, that looks a little saturated, you can be sure I'm gonna be bringing it down. I don't like the saturation, it bothers me. As everything in my sculpt as well, it's like everything that screams too much, I don't like, because it's almost like instead of like doing something realistic, you're creating a caricature of it. That's how I see the forms if they scream too much, and also the colors. If they're screaming too much, there's something that becomes a caricature. It's like it becomes very stylized. Everything in the human face is very subtle, like color-wise and form-wise as well. So they have to all be in the same universe, color and form. So let's do this one. So you see, like, just this this little light spray, it really helps to create kind of like a glue to the whole thing. Like everything becomes more, part of the same thing. And then once I'm done with this, I can go again over certain areas with a darker tone and get some of the darker tones in place, and then come back with this one. So the more you do like back and forth, like between dark and lighter tones, always ending with the lighter tones on top of it, the more you get like an interesting variation for everything, I'm gonna do like over the eyes here as well, but the eyes need that redness and darkness around it. One thing I notice is, I think it's because of the scattering. Every time I do something around eyelids, I tend to go darker and a little bit more magenta, around the eyelids. And because if I go with the skin tone that's very neutral like that, it never looks bright. There's something about the eyelids that I always benefit from getting the eyelids a little bit darker than the rest of the skin. And it always looks better in the renders, So maybe you have a different view, like, it's like we all see things differently. But, it's a matter of like you guys experimenting with your own models and seeing what works best. But at this point here, it's way more evenly distributed, the colors, than they are before, when I had like just blocked, right? Like with those strong colors. So basically like this brush here is the one that's doing a lot of good for the blending of everything, which is like this nice little spray. That's really gonna help. But again, like areas of too much saturation, we're gonna have to do something about it. And then obviously, like, I have to hide the ears later and do the same treatment. Like for the ears, all those little cartilage parts like around it, the frame, right? I'm gonna get a similar tone like this one. Let's see. Let's get this guy here. Let's see if I can see his ear somewhere. Okay, that one is this one, right? You see, like, this is like yellow right there. Yellows and greens, right? Around this edge, and then some reds around there. But those are yellows and greens right there. See the pressure right there? Yellow, yellow, some yellow and very pale stuff in there. Yellow right there. Some pale and more yellow underneath. So all those things, it's like, it's just, it just adds so much to it. It's like, it's the kind of stuff that you take for granted, and we just like add some, you know, skin color is like done, right? Just like, oh yeah, just add some skin color, is gonna look like skin. I was like, yeah, the skin is more complex than that. And but obviously, I mean, everything that I do is it's kind of like idealized, right? It's not like, you don't expect it to look real. It's gonna look realistic and convincing a lot of times, but it's not gonna look real, because to look real, we would need like real information, right? Like stuff that comes like from real scan data or whatever. But we can do a very good job, I think. You know, it's like just emulating things, and the best part is that that preserves your style, right? Like, I mean, it's not something that's going to be like completely sterile, right? Like if you just use scans all the time, it becomes sterile. I mean, there's no artistry. I mean, like there's no you know, it's like figuring out things. And I really like this part about, you know, it's like emulating things, and yeah, some people say like playing God, but that's not the case. I mean, there's no way to emulate you know, nature. It's just this, it's almost like paying homage, right? It's trying to see what's going on with the form and the colors and everything, but in your own way, you know. It's like trying to rediscover things, basically. So that's my thrill. So yeah, it's getting much better now in terms of colors becoming more even. This little, I think that's going to be a good approach. You know, it's like just come with the strong colors, and then use this nice little spray here just to, you know, circular motion, not a lot of pressure. I'm using like a 6 for intensity, and my pressure is very low. So if I use like full pressure, I get this, right? That's full pressure in my tablet, but I'm using like 20% of that. So it's just like barely touching it. There. And then here, kind of like, it's kind of like a generic treatment I'm doing right now. I'm not even looking at the references right now to see their skin tones, right? I noticed before with the little boy, those areas, but at this point here, I'm not looking at anything. And because I'm just like blocking like a generic kind of skin tones overall. It's still very bluish in this area. It's gonna look weird. So I'm gonna copy some colors from here, and I'm gonna try to reintroduce them, because I really wanna make sure that this blends with the skin tone without being like this blue, literal blue, right? Has to have some underlying blue in there, but without screaming too much at me. And now I'm gonna sample my generic color, my default color that I picked from Maya. And I'm gonna try to use like a bigger brush, just to make things even more even here and down there. Even more even. Here, symmetry again. I'm gonna bring this to this area here as well. And then if I have something that looks too pink in there, let's get an area that's not too pink, something more like this. And I'm gonna spray it again around here. I'm gonna remove some of that. So let's try with maybe something like that. So it looks better already. So now I can come with my lighter tones. And then just even things out. Whitish. Circular motion is your friend. Just like circle, circle, circles, instead of straight lines. Here in this area here close to the nose, I'm gonna try to use more of this whitish, but if it's getting too white, let's reintroduce some of this pale orange and yellows. So let's get something like this. I normally just resample like neighbor colors, and then that works nice for just blending things. So at the end, you get the underlying colors, but much more discrete. Let's get this area here a little bit lighter too. And at this point, I'm not even painting the veins yet. I have the veins sculpted, so let's add some color to them as well. But let's do the eyes first. Let's do that coloration I mentioned for the eyelids. And then we have to do this lips as well. Let's take a look at the lips first, because that's always a little tricky depending on the coloring, right? Like, I mean, like in this case here, for his lips, because he had, I think like he was a smoker. So smokers, you know, it's like you get those dots sometimes, stuff like that. So I had those kind of like purplish, grayish, and then dots as well. So there's a lot of that in that kind of skin. But in his case, it's going to be just a little boy, right? So I'm going to have to figure it out. Let's see if you get something like this one, which is my main reference in very not so high res, right? See, like it's a different tone than what I have in there. And he has more reds in the nose. So let's keep this one on the side. Let's use him as a reference right there and get some of that stuff in here. Let's start with the lips. So you shouldn't be too far, but you're gonna see just by introducing this little whitish dots, whitish spray that I'm using all over the place, it should help. So let me just pick a color that neutralizes a little bit. So kind of like in between like orange and red again, sort of whitish like that, no symmetry. Let's start with very low intensity. See, just by doing this, you already get like those little, it becomes richer, right? Like just have a little more noise in that area. Just by doing that, it already helps a lot. But then we're gonna go a little bit darker in certain areas, a little bit lighter in others. Let's go, for example, less pink. So let's get a little bit more yellow. And we're gonna get a little bit more yellow towards this frame here, basically. So kind of blending with the frame like that. Just making things a little bit lighter and towards the skin tone, basically. Just mixing with the skin tone. Now let's get some darker tones. For example, let's get more like, kind of like right in the corner. So between like magenta and kind of like a wine color, right? Kind of wine. So it's a little darker. I'm gonna go with a darker, a little bit closer to the edge, the internal edge right there. Spraying as well. Oops. Turn off my symmetry in here. I can use variations of the size of the spray, right? Use like different draw size. Get like some bigger ones and then smaller ones. Let's get that one. Same with this. Now let's try to find, obviously after I unhide the inside of the mouth, like that pocket that I have in there, and also the, you know, for the eye, same thing, you know, it's like you're gonna have to sample the color that's at the edge and just extend that and paint some more, right? But basically we're gonna be adding this more and more towards the edge itself. And then when I get like right at the edges here, I can actually sample a color that's its neighbor, like that, for example, the skin around here. And I can kind of like tap a little bit of that whitish frame that I had before, just like disguise it and blend with the lips. So it's gonna go more towards the lips now. Almost like the lips, the lip color fades away as it becomes more of the skin around it. But you still have that underlying whitish tone in there, which adds like this impression of some kind of pressure, right? Let's just get darker now, more towards the corner right there. Same around here.
Chris?
Yo.
Hello.
Yeah.
Instead of using a flat color material,
Mm-hmm.
how about chalk?
How about what?
Chalk material.
Oh, I never tried with that. I normally use just the skin for the beginning, and then this one, because the flat color is basically exactly what the map's gonna look like.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're saying like the chalk one is gonna be just as flat, just with some detail?
Yes, with the shadows, a bit of shadows.
Yeah, you see like the tone gets a little bit darker, right? Unless you do something like, for example, like if you tweak the material, you might be able to get away with it. But interesting. Where's them? Oh, it's one of those, how you call those materials, the matte caps, right? Yeah, I would not trust that one.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, this one is like it's exactly how you're gonna come out. It's like when you export the maps. That's why I trust more. But again, like to begin with, I think the skin shader is great. The skin shader, you can just like I said, I mean, like you go and tweak a little bit of this from 10, bring to 20, from 80, bring to 90, and then you get like a nice overall look of the skin tones. But then just to see exactly what you're painting, then you can switch to this one. At this point, I kind of know how it's going to look like. I can even stay in my skin shader here, and then use kind of like as a reference. Let me do some of the. I'm going to use this similar tone I'm using for the lips in here, which now you saw this kind of like wine kind of color, and I'm painting more like closer to the edge, right? We're going to use some of that tone for the nose, but you're going to notice that some of this tone that comes from there, sometimes it's like it's kind of like a cluster of micro veins. You're going to see those little veins. I can show you how I do that kind of stuff. I use like a little brush that's kind of cool. So right here, I'm just going to introduce more of this tone, like kind of, purplish, not purplish, the wine kind of color. So more like in the tip of the nose than the sides, right? Just around here, and the top as well. So we're going to do a little bit more on the top.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Are you painting on your highest subdivision level right now?
Yeah, this is my HD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever have issues with, I know it happens for sure when you paint on a lower subdivision level and try and go up, you get weird polypaint artifacting.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you ever have issues with that popping up just between switching subdivision levels even without painting? Because I've had that issue before, and I've wondered if you'd dealt with that or had a workaround for it.
I had a ton of trouble with color when I tried to use layers, that's for sure. But then with no layers, what happens is that if you're painting, for example, you did all this work in HD, right? And then all of a sudden, like, he was like, yeah, you know what? I'm outside of HD, but I feel like I can do a little tweak here and there outside of HD. Then when you switch back to HD, sometimes things get a little bit screwed up, So I would be very careful. If you're doing any painting, I would paint just inside of HD, it's like to prevent the problem. But other than that, I mean, like, I didn't notice anything like, for example, like switching subdivision levels inside of HD, if that caused any trouble. But I know that between non-HD and HD definitely can cause that. At the same time, there were times I actually went like non-HD, and I actually tweaked my how you call, like, poly paint color adjustments. I did outside of HD because I wanted to do it for the whole head. And then when I switched back to HD, all the detail was still there, So I don't know exactly what causes it, but I know that it's a potential problem, It's like it can happen.
When it does happen, do you have any way to fix it, or is it really just go back to a different version where it's not there?
Basically, yeah. I don't have a way to recover, when that happens. I would say, like, every time you guys come out of HD, before you do anything funny, save straight away. That's like a good practice, like save straight away, and then keep working. I mean, yeah, it's sucky. So now I'm adding some more of this color, the same color I'm using for the lips, like this darker tone, and I just use for the nose. I'm bringing this color to the eyelids as well. But I have to go back to my little guy here, man, because I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. a lot of this stuff is going to look very, very subtle once the subsurface gallery is in place. So I'm probably going to have to paint this pinkish tone a little bit stronger around here. Always with spray. Then a little bit over here. So I get that. And then I'm even going to cover a little bit of this area that I have this pale yellow, so it doesn't scream at me. It has to be discreet, like the transition has to be discreet. I'm noticing some yellows in here, but this is coming from the lighting. See, like the whole side here is yellowish, and this is kind of like a, yeah, it's kind of like a yellow light, and then this one is kind of like a window light or a big softbox, you know, or a small softbox. I don't know. Hard to tell, but it seems like the shadows are not, yeah, semi-sharp, but not very sharp. So it might be like a small source, like you know, like the eye says that's a small source. Yeah, not, I don't know. So let's take a look here. I'm just gonna add some more pinkish right there as well underneath. And then right here. So for the veins, now that we added some of this coloring here, let's get some, oh, he has this interesting area here that's a little bit chapped. It's kind of like, has a little bit of a pinkish tone right underneath the lips. It's almost like it's a little chapped in there, you know. So I'm gonna do that. And everything we're doing with pinking here or reds, it's following the same skin tone that I'm using for the lips, the darker one that I got, this one around there, right? Not fully magenta, not fully red, kind of in between. I can even tell you the color, this one, 102, 37, 36. This is basically like the one that's the overall tone for everything I'm doing from now on, like with the skin, the lip tone for the tip of the nose, and then for the eyes as well. So I'm going to do that, and I'm adding this same kind of tone right here underneath his lips. So at this point here, we got the face kind of covered. I'm gonna add some more of this reddish tone, like it's spray as well around the forehead. It's gonna start adding that. So let's get to flat color so you can see. So more of this spots, right? Kind of like large spray like that. Always in circles. Low intensity is 0.6, right? The color I told you. So basically like not full on pressure. I would say I'm using like 20% of pressure or something like that for my tablet. And now let's take a look at those veins that I mentioned before. For the micro veins, they are very subtle and they are cool to add everywhere. Depending on the character, I mean, like it looks a little bit, it can get too exaggerated sometimes, but sometimes if you do it right, let's see if this one shows it. See it right here, like see it right there, there's one. There's another one. There's a bunch around here, right? Depending on the type of character, you can get, you know, it's like some nice detail just with those little things. So the way I found that it's more interesting, and I always mention this, like it's cheesy, but it's true, that there are so many forms that you find like in the human body that's kind of like a copy or a clone of what you find in nature in different, you know, things. So in the case of the veins, I thought about like what would be a cool thing to sample to make veins, and I thought about lightning, right? So lightning is very cool. I found this, let me open my brush in here so you can see. Let's just maximize this. So let's see, intro micro vein or vein micro. No, that's not the one I want. Veins, this one. So I found this picture. If you research, for example, like lightning, right, and then try to find the high resolution images of lightning, there was one that I found that was basically like black sky, and then some, you know, there's some constructions and buildings in the bottom, but the sky was kind of like this. You can find it, I think, if you Google. I don't remember which one that was, but you can definitely find different ones as well. and I thought it was awesome to represent like micro veins with it, you know. So I create this alpha, and then it's a drag rectangle. And the way I have it set is basically like it paints the color and adds a little bit of a volume too. But this is optional. You can, if you don't want to create a volume, you can actually turn it down here for the Z add. I use this one mostly for eyeballs, right? So I can create some micro veins in the eyeball, so it sculpts and paints at the same time. So in this case here, the way I would do, see, I have the same color, this red. Let's see how it behaves at 100% if it's too much. It's actually not too bad. It looks a little dark. I'm gonna go a little bit lighter here. Let's see. Something like that. So I don't know in his case where that would be, you know, but I would guess that if we have micro veins, normally gonna be like tip of the nose and around here. So let's get a lower intensity. Let's try with the 50 or something. I'm gonna paint some of them around here, just in different angles. You know, it's like you can start sometimes from the same one. So you can create like almost like a little network like that, or a cluster, right? Something like that. It's good if you create like little clusters, and those like do a few of them in the same spot, because that way it doesn't look like a copy of each other, right? You can actually disguise that just by adding these little clusters, like go over and over, you know. Let's see, like another angle like that. So you create this little network like a spider web. So this is like the brush I use like for a lot of these little veins. You can switch to something like around this area here. Sometimes you get some of them as well. So you can do something like that, you know. Let's do another little cluster here. That looks too similar. Let's try like that. And then maybe another one. So tiny little clusters, you know, it's like you can do something like that. And then when you go to something like around the eyes, so we can do some of them in the eyelids as well, which looks really cool actually. When you get like a glimpse of it, like from renders, you can get some of them in the eyelids. So kind of like the vascular kind of like stuff coming like from the center in there towards the eye. So gonna do some around here as well. Let's see, something like that. Not too big, right? Otherwise it's gonna look weird, but small enough. Let's try that. Just to have something there, right? To create some interest. Because he's so pale, they're probably gonna look very nice if you add like an area like that. Again, I'm gonna create a little network here. Let's see. That looks too similar. Let's see, something like that, and then in between. Try to disguise as much as possible. And then you can even add like some greenish ones. So in between green and blue, kind of like a teal. Let's see if we go, cannot go too strong with the green. Let's see, something like, actually it has to be darker than that. Let's try that. And now it's too dark. Let's go a little bit lighter. Yeah, something like that. And then if you need like custom ones, then obviously like paint everything by hand, get that sharp little brush and then paint by hand. But in this case, for those little details, man, just like, yeah, little brush in there. It's really very useful. Maybe like around the chin here somewhere. Let's try to get a little bit of little veiny in there. Let's see. Again, like try not to make the pattern too repetitive. And let's see what else we can do here. Oh, we have the veins to paint in the forehead. So I'm just gonna paint those ones. And then from here, we go straight to Maya, and let's export this thing and see how it looks like for our first render. So let's take a look. So this is the brush I showed you guys. They're just like simple alpha, right? Like I tweaked in Photoshop, actually. I smoothed it out because it was kind of noisy. So, you know, make it a little cleaner in Photoshop. I didn't import it here. So the resolution is not even big. It's like 456 by 456. Should be good enough. And then, so for my veins now, I can use just a regular, regular standard brush with no alpha. I don't need an alpha. So you see, like, let's switch to a, first let me check the color here. So if I go to a green that's kind of like this, let's look at my reference as well, like what we see in there. So it's kind of like a, yeah, it's kind of like a teal color, right? And then, so if I paint in here, let's see what's the intensity of it. It's very, very intense. Can be lighter. It can be less intense. So let's see something like this. That's a little bit better, but still very intense. See intensity 1. Now it's starting to look better, right? So intensity 1, my color in here is about 69, 125, and 99. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna try to use some of the pressure sensitivity to get some variations as well. I'm gonna switch to my basic material so I can see where I'm painting. And I'm gonna start from this guy here. Very low pressure, increase the pressure around here. A little bit lower again. See, I still have to paint to detail those areas, but you should be fine, you know, mixing things. Just detail that one. Let's switch material here. Let's see how it looks. Looks kind of nice like that, right? And then let's go back in here and do it again for this guy. And then for this big one right here. I think there's one in there they're gonna redo because the position doesn't look very correct. But those ones, the center one should be fine. And then I'm gonna go, as it starts getting a little bit shallower, I actually release some of the pressure, right? Because it's only like strong at the middle because they're popping out, so you're gonna see more of them. But this one here, I'm gonna paint it right now, but I'm gonna basically like eliminate this vein later and just redo it because the position can be a little bit different. And then let's do this one here as well. Got a little bit of this warm kind of zigzag here. Let's start here. Something like that, and do a little pass on top. There's some other ones here. This one is going to be cool in the render, kind of breaking up that silhouette in there. And then this guy. This one around here. Right there. And then from time to time, you can just like do a little, just like make it peek through, you know, it's like just do a tiny little bit of it. So we can actually see kind of like almost like an impression of a vein, but without actually having that vein. So it's like a very simple painting process, right? It's just very low intensity overall. And just being careful with it. And then let's see this one here as well. And once you're done with this, we jump right into exporting those maps first, the color maps, and then into Maya. And then probably not going to show today, but tomorrow we're going to be working with some more pimples and stuff. And then I can show you like some the way that I paint like those little spots in the skin, you know, like since we're going to have to do them like synchronized with the pimples. So let's take a look at this now with skin shader. You see it's very subtle, right? I can even increase some of that. Let's see, just a little bit more intense right in the middle. But it's good that you're using your pressure sensitivity to make sure that they kind of like appear and vanish, you know, because otherwise it looks too completely, it screams at you, right? You don't need anything to scream at you. If anything in the color it's screaming at you, it's like, it's wrong. It's not gonna look good in the renders, you know, it's gonna really look stylized. Almost like, you know, it's like a concept art or something. If that's the intention, to create something that looks like a strong kind of concept art, you know, kind of super strong colors and stuff, because that's what the client wants to see, right? Lots of colors and stuff to feel impressed. then you go for it. Sometimes, like I've seen some renders done that way to look like, you know, a nice painting, like a nice concept like painting, and it turned out really amazing. And I was like, I've seen that some artists did, but if that's not intention, you know, if the intention is to make something that looks more natural, then I would really keep things not so dramatic. Last thing, let's just do this part here. I'm gonna add a little bit more of whitish around the brows area. So around here, just gonna add some white here because I wanted that part to read like bone in there. And then let's export this. Let's see what happens. So now we have it. Let's switch to non-HD. This is gonna be a first pass, and then we can compare, you know, it's like if it's something that looks too strong, we can come back and even things out a little bit and then send it back to Maya. And then it's gonna be that process of comparing things, you know. It's like I have this image here now on the side, and I normally render, I put the render side by side, and I start like trying to see what I can do, you know, to improve it. So that's gonna be the process. The ears are not touched just yet. It's just that basic color, but everything looks kind of good. So let's try to switch to my basic material so you can see the forms. And then let's do that whole thing. I don't need to do the whole thing about like the switch morph target because we're just exporting color, right? And then in this case, let me just save my file first before we lose everything. And this file is a little funny, man. I opened it before and it crashed. And then the second time it opened, so I'm not trusting 100%, you know. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna save this project, and I think I'm gonna save the Z tool too, just in case, because that would suck to lose everything. So just save this, and then let's save the Z tool as well. Okay, so, let's try it. Yeah, it's fine. So now let's just rename this to albedo, right? And then I normally rename based on the iteration I'm at. So I'm gonna just put like albedo, what, 17, something like that. So let's do albedo 17. And in this case, like I said, I don't need to save a morph target or anything because we're not exporting displacement map. It's just a color. And that should be very fast to export. So let's go multi-map exporter, texture from Polypaint, 8K, because we are dealing with HD now. We need to get serious there. No switch morph target necessary, no displacement, anything. So we should be good to go. Let's go create all maps, source images, and then albedo. I'm actually curious to see any render of him with some color, you know, because just seeing like the silicon version of it is one thing, but when we start adding some actual texture, things start to actually look nicer. So I cannot wait to do that. You see, I added some asymmetry as well in the shoulders and the head. So I can talk about this very quickly before I go to Maya. One thing that I tend to do, because I want to preserve my overall symmetry for the face, instead of like, for example, if I need to rotate the head all the way to the side to pose the character for a portrait, I do the opposite. For example, like I keep the head in place, completely symmetrical. In this case here, I already broke the symmetry. Obviously, you see the nose that are a little crooked. Everything's a little crooked now. I already broke the symmetry by now. But mostly symmetrical. From this point, I could potentially create a symmetrical version for the face from this point. But I wanted to add a little bit of a rotation to the head and the shoulders. So what I do, I actually rotate everything else. So I select the head and keep it frozen. And then I add like, I start rotating things from the neck down here. And then if I needed to create, for example, let's just do it here. Let's see. If I need to create a pose where the face is completely rotated, let's do something like that. And then eliminate that. So I'm gonna soft select it, maybe do a little nod of passing here. So if I needed to rotate the head, for example, instead of rotating the head, I would just do the opposite. Basically like lock the head where it is, find a spot here, and then, you know, rotate the body. So in that case, when I pose him, even like if I do something like this, right? something funny like that. So if I pose him like that, now when I render the portrait, I can actually twist my camera like that in Maya, right? Do a little rotation of the camera, and I can have something that looks like, oh yeah, he's turning his head, you know, in 2 different directions. But in fact, I'm just doing the opposite. I'm turning the body, right? So that's basically what I did. And that's basically what I do for the characters. But there's always the option to do a quick rig as well in Maya, you know, so I can have things rigged in there. But that's not what I'm doing. Okay, so let's take a look at let's take a look in Maya now. Let's bring those maps and plug them. It's cool that I have everything already here with some renders we can compare to. So it's going to be compared to this render here, this one, right? Let's turn this off right here. And then let's plug this texture. So easy peasy, just select the model, go to your subsurface color, click here, file, off, Arnold, texture, auto texture generation off, and then make sure that always you dim on. And then we're gonna get our personal projects, Sammy, source images, and then by date, albedo 17. Okay, that's all we need. So that's there, found the 3 tiles. Good, already switched to utility sRGB texture because we are teaching Maya how to do that. So now let's do a quick render here. Let's see what happens. So you have this one to compare to. So let's try that. Let's do so I don't torture you guys, let's do a progressive render. So I can actually see the results kind of refining. Let's try that. But I really like this woods 4K better, you know, it's like in terms of HDRI. So, oh, he got dark, huh? Got very dark. Now there's a trick for that as well. So it's funny because like maybe Maya is seeing as color corrected. That's why it's getting so dark. But there is this trick right here. He got tan, man. Look at him. Like, oh man, he just went to the beach. All right. So let's take a look at this. There's a couple of different layers, not layers, but nodes we can use here. So let's just get him again. Make sure you have just his network here. And then you see like I have plugged into the subsurface color. I have this albedo one right here, right? So we're gonna put something between the albedo and the shader connection. So we're gonna go to your Arnold. Actually, this one is gonna be, is it Arnold? No, I don't remember. Is it Arnold or is it, I think it's a Maya shader. So let's take a look here. Go to Maya Utilities. And then there is like a color. Let's see exactly which one that is. Oh, I think sorry?
Which one are you looking for?
Color correction.
If you just click in the in your like workspace, and I think it's tab, then you can start typing like AI color correct.
Oh, here?
No, down in like the, yeah, in there somewhere. I think it's, if you hit tab or space, you can see. Yeah,
oh, I never do that. Huh.
AI, yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go. Man, I never do this. There you go. Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. So now this one here, we're gonna be doing something. We're gonna be plugging the out color from this one into the input. So you're gonna see that we have the RGB in there. If there's RGB, you can just plug straight away to the input, right? And then from the out color, we're gonna plug back to our subsurface. So I'm gonna just eliminate this connection here. You can just select it and press delete. And then out color is gonna go into the subsurface color, right? So now the difference here, you're gonna see it when I select the model. So I have the model in here. You're gonna see it right there in subsurface color. If I click on it, I have these options now. I have like some color correction nodes. It's really useful actually. So if I select an area that I wanna tweak, for example, right here, again, like cannot select because it's offset, the window is offset, it's weird. It's a little bug that wasn't present in the past, but it is now. And then, for example, if I just render it here, we should get exactly the same result because we didn't tweak anything. But you see the gamma here? Look at that. You start bringing things up. And then you can shift the hue as well. So look at this. You can start shifting towards like purple or green, blue, like that, right? So there's all kinds of stuff you can do with this. You can desaturate the color a little bit, but in this case here, I'm just increasing the gamma and it should give me enough information. So let's see, just with the gamma itself, if I get, let's see where my reference is, right there, this guy. Obviously, I don't have the same lighting setup, but I can kind of like, you know, figure it out. I mean, like by switching some of those shaders and seeing which one works the best, I can tell that, for example, like the nose, I can go a little bit more red at the tip, you know. But overall, let's see how those colors are playing here. It's just so good to see anything, man, with the color, you know, with the little albedo in there, because then it really starts coming to life. Because otherwise, it's just like that, right? It's a silicone mask. Now, with an actual color in place, then we're going to start measuring the intensity for the specular, for example, right? So I always compare, for example, the specular from the eyes, which we're going to be talking about tomorrow. We're going to be basically like focusing a lot on the eyes. I believe it's tomorrow. And then, so once we have the shaders, I'm going to give you all the shader parameters as well for the eyes. I'm going to talk about the sculpture part. Once you have that set up, then you can use the eyes as the comparison point to the rest of the skin, right? Like, so basically, like you can pull any image from the internet or any picture of yourself or whatever, and you can start seeing like what's the difference between the level of specularity you see in a human eye and, you know, it's like in the skin overall, right? And then obviously there's all kinds of variations. Some people are going to have like more oily skin, so you're going to get more of that coat layer that we mentioned, like the secondary layer, so kind of like a sweaty kind of layer, right? The sebum, and then some people are going to have, for example, like you're going to find, especially like beautiful women and everything, you're going to find like they use makeup, so there's some powder involved. So with the powder involved, like there's a bunch of things that, you know, the specular kind of goes away, and then the subsurface kind of goes away in part. So there's all kinds of things that happen. But overall, depending on the subject, you can start measuring, for example, like between this guy here now and then the picture of him, I'm going to first have to do a batch of different renders to see the average that I get, right? Because depending of, let's see if I can find one of him. Right here, for example, it's black and white, but there's plenty of speck happening right here and right here, right? There's another one of him right here, also small, but look at this. Good amount of speck around here and in here. So it seems like I'm a little bit high in speck. I can bring it down, but it's cool because once you have a color that actually works across the board, like for multiple HDRIs, then you can start averaging things, you know, so I can see like, okay, so for certain, you know, for different types of HDRI, sometimes you have like something that's completely diffused, right? An outdoors, you know, HDRI that doesn't have like a sun coming from like a specific spot. It's just like a cloudy day. So everything is diffused. So you're not going to get this type of specular ever, right? Even like the eyes, if you don't have a strong source, they're going to go kind of dead, right? Like with a very diffuse HDRI. So that's why it's important to switch all those HDRIs, you know. For example, like I have something like this. Let's see, let's save it here. And let's switch this HDRI to something like that forest that I had, like the woods in here. So let's see how it behaves in here, for example, right? And then I see that in here, it's gonna look more natural, right? Because it's a little bit more diffuse overall. So the speck that we saw so strongly in the nose, it's probably not gonna be very strong in here. It's gonna look kind of nice right there, right? Just enough. But then I'm gonna keep tweaking. So let's save this one here as well. So the eyes now, apparently like in his case, I'm gonna have to go less dark because that's basically what I use for all my other characters. But in his case, it seems like his eyelid's going to be very pale, because those guys, if you look at this guy, for example, right, super pale. So I'm going to have to dial back that darkness I added to the eyelids to have something that's a little bit more pale like that. So we're going to have to do this next. Let's just do a view store snapshot. So we have now this guy and we have this guy to compare. We're going to have to find like an average nice. So I like those two ones, but I also like the studio one, which is this one. I think it's Studio Small 2. But the thing about this one is that the specular really pops in this one, right? This is supposed to be this guy here. So you see like the source is very small. It's just a light like that. So you get the tiny, very sharp spots like that, which is cool for the skin. But let's see how it works for this specific one. Kind of nice, actually. It's gonna have like enough spec in there. But yeah, like I really encourage you guys like to get like a bunch of HDRIs. You know, it's like someone asked me. I don't remember who asked me. Like on Facebook group, I have to go and reply to a bunch of new questions in there. But someone asked about having like keyframes. I don't have in this scene, but in the past I did that. You know, it's like I would create like multiple keyframes, basically like hiding and unhiding those guys. So like in each frame, one of them would be unhidden and then the other ones would be hidden. And then I would have like, for example, 10 and then 10 frames. And I could just like render an animation and get them to render everything like during the night, you know, so I can get everything done in the morning. But I don't have at this point. At this point, I'm just switching and testing them, you know. Some of them are actually, I'm overexposing or underexposing a little bit. For example, this one, by default, the Studio Small, I believe is a little bit overexposed. So if I look at this one here, let's see what I have. No, actually this one I'm using full power, I guess. But there is something about the positioning of it, because by default, let's see the rotation I have for it. So you see like I have a rotation of -177, which can be positive as well, right? As if you make the relationship between 0 and 360, you can get like the positive version of it. But it's basically like this is the rotation I have, and then it's not like a direct light. There's that one from the side, and then there's that one from the back, and that's about it. So another one from the corner right there. I don't even know where the camera is here. Normally I can see the camera. Yeah, but apparently this one would be the background right there, you see? So that would be the background. So instead of like using that one as the background, I'm actually rotating it and using it kind of like to the side. So it's looking to the left of that background. So that's the Studio Small 2. And it's really nice, you know? I really like it. Like that. But it's so cool, man. That's the part that I like the best, you know? It's like when we have a few maps plugged, I don't have all the detail in place yet. You saw like I have like halfway with my pores and wrinkles and everything. It's not even, you know, close to done with that part. But I like to work with iterations, you know. It's like that's why from the get-go, first week, we start doing renders already. And then from that point, we just iterate on that, you know. It's like add more HDRIs, refine the model, render again, refine, render again, you know. I think it's the best approach, like to get faster results, you know. Very cool. I'm actually happy with the way he's starting out, just like for how fast we painted the texture today. Obviously gonna keep like refining it and everything, but it's nice to see, you know, working in different environments. Yeah. You guys have any questions? We're kind of like over the time, but it's all, I can take a few questions if you want.
Chris, it's about the scale. In Maya, does the scale, changing the scale would change the subsurface scale as well?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
because like before, like we came to that conclusion, right? Like that. I mean, like if you change the scale itself, but the model doesn't change scale, then it's gonna be fine. But what was that? Like the subsurface, we did something about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I remember.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Like when you switch to 2 inches just for to measure the head, it was fine. But then as soon as we start doing the subsurface stuff, we had to switch to millimeters, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to double check with you. Should we set the scale in Maya to millimeter, right?
Let's take a look right now. Look,
Yeah,
let's see, just to confirm. No, it's actually centimeters.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
No problem. So in centimeters, we should get that scale at 0.130, right? And that should be good.
Right. Thank you. I got another question. Is your bump map, bump value map, and bump depth map the same, or they are different?
The bump value and the bump depth. Let's see. The bump value is going to be the. Let's see. Bump value would be the cell noise, right? So basically, like if I
go, I see.
Yeah.
Right.
So this one here, if I go back, so the bump value is the cell noise, and then the bump depth is basically the map we're using.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. No worries. All right, guys, let's build some eyes tomorrow and then do some painting as well. So we get like that final element that I saw some of you guys are posting already renders, you know, like some with even like with some hair and stuff, probably like from watching the previous classes. Yeah, I mean, like I'm excited to give you like the settings for the eyes because it's really what brings everything to life, you know. I feel like, you know, it's like I'm always like ahead of you guys because we finished the first week and I already put like my previous eyes in there and then I know that they work for other renders. So it's kind of like I take an advantage, right? Like it's like you guys like, man, what about the eyes? You know, it's like, but tomorrow finally we put that piece together. So at this point we have like the specular bump height, albedo, and the reference map, right? Everything plugged. And then again, like I'm gonna post like some screenshots from my ZBrush straight away from what I have right now, the current stuff. So you can actually see the intensity I painted my maps and everything. So you can actually try to mimic that. And then you should get like good results if you follow that. And also the scale stuff that he just spoke about, you know, it's very important. If it's wrong, I mean, like the character is gonna look like a candle, you know, and we don't want that. We want to look like actual skin. But very cool, guys. I'm excited to work some more. You know, after the class today, just like do some tweaks in the albedo and then post something. Probably going to do like the ears painting, and I can talk about them tomorrow. But it's going to be the same principle. You know, that stuff that I share, like around the cartilage is going to go a little bit more yellow, just like we have here, right? Like for this area. So basically, around this whole area here is going to be yellower, and then more red around here, more red inside of it. But tomorrow I can just show you guys and then talk about it. It's going to be basically everything we did here. Nothing new. It's just going to be a different area painted, basically. Yep. Oh, and we have to do a lot of work in the neck as well. We have some bumps and stuff we want to use. But in the coming days after the eyes are done and everything, then we're going to be talking about more detail of other areas. Yep.
I just want to say so much more informative, the albedo part.
It's much better, right?
Yes. No. I mean, as information, it's so much more informative. The fact that you show the color more saturated.
Oh yeah, right. It's easier to see what I was doing.
Was a struggle before.
Yeah.
The previous lesson.
Awesome. Yeah. So good. Yeah, I might be actually make like if it this lesson turns out, you know, it's like a good one. I might like in the future make it available, you know, it's like on YouTube because I know a lot of people are going to take advantage of that. And yeah, let's see. I'm planning to do some like more free lessons and stuff, but yeah, awesome. Thank you guys. I see you soon. Have fun.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Exactly.
Bye.